Waitress blew bubbles to calm the girl in crisis. Unaware her father, the vampire king, was watching. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was a rainy afternoon in a small, quiet cafe nestled on the corner of a busy street in downtown New York City. The cafe had seen better days, but it still held a certain charm, a haven for weary souls looking for a break from the world outside. Mia, a young waitress, was wiping down the counter when the door creaked open, and in walked a little girl, drenched from the storm. Her pale face was a picture of distress, and her small body trembled as she stepped inside, looking for refuge from the downpour. Mia's eyes softened as she saw the girl, who couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Without a word, Mia stepped forward, offering her a warm napkin and a gentle smile. "Hey there, sweetie. You look like you could use some warmth," she said kindly. The girl hesitated for a moment, before nodding slowly and accepting the napkin. Mia led her to a booth by the window and poured her a cup of hot cocoa, noticing the girl's hands were shaking as she held the mug. "Thank you," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. Mia couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. Something was off about this situation, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She sat down across from the girl, offering a comforting presence. "What's your name, sweetie?" Mia asked, trying to make the girl feel at ease. The little girl's eyes darted around the cafe, as if she was afraid to speak, but eventually she whispered, "Lucy." Mia smiled warmly. "Lucy, that's a beautiful name. I'm Mia. What brings you here today?" Lucy hesitated, her eyes darting to the door as if she was expecting someone. I'm running away," she said, her voice shaking with fear. Mia frowned, unsure of how to respond. "Running away from what?" she asked gently, leaning forward. Lucy's gaze dropped to the table, and for a moment, she seemed lost in thought. "My father, he's dangerous," she whispered. Mia's heart sank at the words. She had no idea what this little girl was going through, but her instincts told her that Lucy wasn't just scared of a bad day at school. There was something deeper, something darker, lurking behind her eyes. As Mia reached out to comfort Lucy, she noticed something strange. From the corner of her eye, she saw a tall figure standing at the entrance of the cafe. The man's presence was commanding, his eyes fixed on Lucy with an intensity that sent a chill down Mia's spine. The man didn't speak. He just watched, his eyes glowing with an eerie light, as if he was waiting for something. Mia couldn't quite place it, but she felt as if the whole room had grown colder, more suffocating. She turned her attention back to Lucy, who was still nervously stirring her cocoa. The man, though, kept his gaze fixed on them, making Mia feel increasingly uneasy. Just as she was about to say something to Lucy, the man's voice broke the silence. "She's not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Mia froze, her breath catching in her throat. The man's eyes glowed a deep crimson, and she realized, in that moment, that he was no ordinary person. He was something far more powerful, far more terrifying. And Lucy, this innocent little girl, seemed to be at the center of it all. But Mia didn't know how to react. All she could do was sit there, her heart pounding in her chest, as the man stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Lucy. This was the moment Mia would realize that the world she thought she knew was about to be turned upside down. Little did she know, the man before her was no ordinary man. He was the vampire king, and Lucy, the girl she had just comforted, was his daughter. And now, Mia had unknowingly become part of a world she never could have imagined. As Mia sat frozen at the table, her heart pounding, the air seemed to thicken around her. The man standing at the entrance of the cafe was not just an ordinary person. His eyes, glowing a deep crimson, sent a chill down her spine. Every instinct screamed that she was in danger. But it wasn't just the man's presence that terrified her. It was the fact that the girl sitting across from her, Lucy, was the source of this strange tension. Mia had no idea what was going on, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was about to change forever. The man stepped closer, his movements fluid and purposeful, and Mia instinctively moved to shield Lucy. though she had no idea what was coming. "You've seen too much." The man's voice was soft, but it held an authority that made the hairs on the back of Mia's neck stand up. I don't understand," Mia stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She looked down at Lucy, whose wide eyes were filled with both fear and something else, recognition, perhaps? The man didn't respond to her confusion. His gaze remained fixed on Lucy. Mia couldn't help but notice how the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. The warmth of the cafe was suddenly replaced by an unsettling coldness, and the sound of the rain outside, once a gentle patter, now felt like a distant echo. "You'll come with me," the man said, his voice colder now. "No," Mia said quickly, standing up, her voice trembling with a mix of defiance and fear. "She's just a child. What do you want from her?" The man's eyes flickered to Mia, a flash of something ancient and dangerous in them. "What I want," he began, "is for her to be safe." His words hung in the air like a threat, and Mia's confusion deepened. He wasn't speaking to her. He was speaking to Lucy. Lucy, still sitting quietly at the table, finally spoke, her voice barely a murmur. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring her into this." The man's gaze softened for a fraction of a second before it returned to its icy coldness. "It's not your fault, child." The words sent a strange shiver through Mia's body. Who was this man, really? She was starting to realize that she might never truly understand the situation she was caught in. The man walked past Mia without a second glance, his movements almost predatory. He stopped in front of Lucy and crouched down to her level, his eyes studying her with a tenderness that was out of place for someone who exuded such power. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly, his tone gentle now. Lucy nodded slowly, her small hands clutching the edge of the table. For a moment, it seemed like time stood still. Mia wanted to say something, anything, but her words caught in her throat. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was about to happen would change everything. "Don't worry," the man said, noticing her unease. "I won't hurt you." He turned to leave, and Lucy slowly followed, her eyes casting one last look at Mia. "I'll be back," she said softly, her voice full of uncertainty. Mia watched in stunned silence as the two of them disappeared out the door, leaving her alone in the suddenly quiet cafe. Her mind raced, her thoughts a chaotic blur. What had just happened? Who was that man? And what did he mean when he said he wouldn't hurt Lucy? Mia sat down heavily, her hands still trembling. She had no answers, just more questions. But one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. She had somehow been pulled into a world she didn't understand, a world where vampires and power beyond imagination existed. Mia had no idea how she would ever make sense of it, but deep down, she knew that her life had just taken an irreversible turn. The next few hours would reveal more than she could have ever imagined. As the storm outside began to die down, Mia's mind raced with questions. What was the man? Why had he been watching them? And what was Lucy's connection to him? The mystery was beginning to take shape, but Mia still had no idea how much deeper it would go, or how much danger she might be in. The only thing she knew for sure was that this wasn't over. It was just beginning. I was left alone in the cafe, the echoes of the storm outside mixing with the stillness of the room. My hands shook as I tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. The man, the vampire king, and his daughter, Lucy. I still couldn't wrap my mind around it all. What had just transpired? Who were these people, really? And why had they come into my life so suddenly? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. I looked up, expecting to see Lucy walk back through the door. But it wasn't Lucy. Instead, the man, the vampire king, stepped inside. He closed the door gently behind him, his presence filling the small space of the cafe. His crimson eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, it felt like the room had grown colder. He said nothing at first, just observed me with a quiet intensity that made my heart race. "I told you I wouldn't hurt you." His voice was low, but it carried a sense of authority. I swallowed hard, not sure what to say. "Where is Lucy?" I asked, the question slipping from my lips before I could stop it. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the counter and gestured for me to sit. I hesitated, but something about his calm demeanor put me at ease. It was as if he wasn't a man at all, but something much older, much more dangerous. "Lucy is safe," he finally said. "She is with me now." I felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. I still didn't understand what was going on, what his connection to Lucy was, or why he had come to this cafe. Why did you come here? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He turned to face me, his eyes gleaming with something unreadable. Because of you, he said simply. Because of what you did for her. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? Lucy was in danger, he explained, his tone softer now. You may not know it, but you helped her more than you can imagine. You calmed her when she needed it most. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't do anything, I said, feeling defensive. I just blew some bubbles to make her laugh. And that was enough, he said, his voice carrying a strange weight. You see, there's much more to Lucy than you realize. She's not just a little girl. She is special. My heart skipped a beat. Special. I repeated. How? He paused, his eyes narrowing as if he was weighing his words carefully. Lucy is my daughter. But she is also the heir to something much older than our world. A bloodline that has been kept secret for centuries. She has powers that are beyond what you can imagine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Hey, part of me wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as some kind of joke, but the seriousness in his eyes made me freeze. What does that have to do with me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. It has everything to do with you, he said, his tone intense. You've just become a part of this world, whether you like it or not. I swallowed hard. What do you mean, this world? The world of vampires, magic, and ancient bloodlines, he explained. You've been pulled into it simply by showing kindness to Lucy. I shook my head, unable to comprehend the full weight of his words. No, you're wrong, I said, trying to deny it. I'm just a waitress. I don't belong in some fantasy world. You do now, he said firmly. Because of Lucy, because of what you've done for her, you're now part of something much bigger than yourself. My head was spinning, and I could feel a headache coming on. I don't understand, I muttered, feeling overwhelmed. You don't have to understand, he replied. Not yet, anyway, but you will. And soon, you'll realize just how important you've become to everything. He moved closer, his presence looming over me like a shadow. I can protect you, keep you safe from what's coming. But you must stay with me, with Lucy. The offer was tempting, but it also scared me more than anything. What had I gotten myself into? What did he mean by what's coming? What's coming? I asked, my voice shaky. Danger, he said simply. And a choice. A choice that will change everything for all of us. He turned to leave, his cloak sweeping behind him. Come with me, he said, his voice softer now. It's not too late to change your destiny. As he walked toward the door, I stood there, rooted to the spot, my mind racing. Could I really walk away from all of this? Could I turn my back on Lucy and the world that had just opened up before me? The decision seemed impossible, but deep down, I knew it had already been made for me. The moment I met Lucy, everything had changed, and there was no going back. As the man, the Vampire King, walked towards the door, I was left standing in the middle of the cafe, my mind racing with questions. His words echoed in my ears. You've just become a part of this world, whether you like it or not. I had no idea what he meant, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that something bigger than me was at play here. A world of vampires, magic, and ancient bloodlines. It was all too much to process. I wasn't a part of any fantasy. I was just Mia, a waitress who had been doing her best to survive, one shift at a time. And now, suddenly, my life had been thrown into chaos. I had seen what no one was supposed to see. I had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I didn't know if I should be terrified or fascinated. The rain had stopped, but the chill it left behind remained in the air, as if the world had shifted in a way I couldn't fully understand. I knew I had a choice to make, but how could I make it when I had no idea what I was dealing with? Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. Meet me at the old park. Midnight. Come alone. My heart raced as I stared at the message. Who was it? And why did they want me to come alone? Was this part of whatever strange world I had just been thrust into? I could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on me. Should I go? Or should I run and try to forget this whole mess? But the curiosity, the need for answers, pulled me in. I had to know more about Lucy, about the man who called himself the Vampire King, and about the mysterious world they were a part of. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, making my way through the quiet streets of the city. The night was dark and empty. The only sound was the soft tap of my boots against the wet pavement. The old park wasn't far, and as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to loom just a little too long. My steps quickened, and before I knew it, I was standing at the entrance to the park. The trees loomed overhead, their branches creaking in the wind. It was eerily quiet. I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. I took a step forward, my heart pounding. The air felt different here, thick with something I couldn't name. And then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. It was him, the Vampire King. His eyes glowed a deep crimson in the darkness, and his presence was overwhelming. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching me with that unreadable gaze. My breath caught in my throat. "You came," he said, his voice low and steady. "I didn't know if you would. Why did you bring me here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my insides were in turmoil. He stepped closer, and for a moment, I thought I might faint from the sheer power emanating from him. "I need to know if you're ready," he said. "Ready for what?" "Ready for the truth," he replied. "Ready to understand what's happening. Ready to protect Lucy. Ready to face what's coming." His words sent a chill down my spine. "What's coming?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King's eyes narrowed, and he looked out over the park, as if he could see something in the distance that I couldn't. "Danger," he said simply. "For Lucy. For you. For everyone." "What do you mean?" I asked, fear rising in my chest. "The world is changing," he said, his voice filled with an intensity that made me shiver. "There are forces at work that want to control everything. And Lucy is the key." I didn't understand. "The key to what?" I asked. "To everything," he said. "To a power that can reshape the world. To a legacy that has been hidden for centuries." I felt dizzy, like the ground beneath me was shifting. "I don't understand. I'm just a waitress. I'm not part of this, whatever this is." The Vampire King took a step closer, and I could feel the heat of his presence. "You don't have to understand yet," he said. "But you will. And when you do, you'll realize that you're the only one who can stop it." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I felt the weight of them pressing down on me, like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into a dark, unknown abyss. "Stop what?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "The end," he said softly. "The end of everything you know." I stared at him, my mind reeling. This was no longer a choice. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I was part of something much bigger, something much darker. And now, there was no turning back. The Vampire King's words hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with meaning and a promise of danger. I stood frozen, unable to move, as I tried to process everything he had just said. The end of everything I knew? My mind raced, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This was no longer just about me. This was about something much bigger, something I wasn't prepared for. He saw the fear in my eyes and stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't understand yet," he said softly, as if reading my thoughts. "But you will." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was no longer mine to control. "What do you need me to do?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King studied me for a long moment before answering. "I need you to protect Lucy. She's the key to stopping what's coming. And you're the only one who can keep her safe." I swallowed hard. "But how am I supposed to protect her? I'm just a waitress. I don't even know what's going on." "You don't need to know everything right now," he replied, his voice calm. But there was an underlying urgency to it. "What matters is that you stay close to her. Keep her safe. There are people, powerful people, who will stop at nothing to get to her. And when they do, they'll destroy everything." I felt a pit form in my stomach. "Who are these people?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. "Vampires, witches, and others who want to control the power Lucy possesses," he said. "They've been searching for her for years. And now that they know she's alive, they'll do anything to take her." I looked at him, trying to make sense of it all. "And you want me to help her?" "Why me?" He tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. "Because, Mia, you're the one who reached her. You were the one who calmed her down when no one else could. You're the one who saw her for who she truly is. And that makes you important in ways you don't even understand yet." His words were a puzzle, each piece a little more difficult to fit together. I had no idea what was happening, but I couldn't deny the pull, the responsibility that was now on my shoulders. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted, feeling the weight of everything bearing down on me. "You can," he said with absolute certainty. "You have to. Because if you don't, Lucy won't survive. And neither will anyone else." His words struck me like a punch to the gut. I had no choice but to trust him, to do whatever it took to keep Lucy safe. But as I stood there, facing the man who had just turned my world upside down, I realized something. This wasn't just about protecting Lucy anymore. This was about survival. And I was in deeper than I could have ever imagined. The Vampire King turned away and began to walk toward the park's exit. "Come with me," he said, his voice carrying an edge of finality. "There's much more for you to learn, and very little time to do so." I hesitated for a moment, but then I followed him, knowing that my life had been irrevocably changed. As we walked through the dimly lit park, the silence was suffocating, the only sound the soft crunch of gravel beneath our feet. I could feel the presence of something dark surrounding us, something that felt like it was watching, waiting. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice breaking the silence. "To meet someone who can help you understand what's happening," the Vampire King said without looking back. "We need to prepare." I didn't ask for details. I was too scared, too overwhelmed by everything I had learned in the last few hours. We reached the edge of the park, where a sleek black car was parked, its engine humming softly in the night. The Vampire King opened the door for me, and I climbed inside, my heart racing. I didn't know where we were going, or who we were going to meet. But I knew one thing. I was no longer just a waitress. I was part of something far bigger, and whether I was ready or not, it was up to me to protect Lucy and to survive what was coming. The car sped off into the night, and I felt the weight of everything settle over me. This was only the beginning, and I had no idea what would happen next. The car drove through the night, its tires humming against the wet road. As the city lights blurred into a distant glow, I sat in silence, my mind reeling from everything I had learned in such a short amount of time. The Vampire King, this man who seemed so powerful, so distant, had just revealed a world I never thought existed. Vampires, magic, a hidden bloodline. It all felt like a nightmare, but it was real. The weight of what he said hung in the air like a thick fog. Lucy was the key to everything, to stopping whatever was coming, and now I was part of it. I had no choice but to follow him, to protect her. But how could I? What did I even know about this world? The car slowed, and I looked up to see a massive mansion looming ahead, its dark silhouette rising against the night sky. The Vampire King didn't speak, but the message was clear. This was where we were headed. The car turned down a long, winding driveway lined with tall, ancient trees. The mansion's lights flickered in the distance, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. The sense of unease I'd felt earlier was growing, tightening around my chest. When we finally reached the mansion, the door opened before the Vampire King even stepped out. A tall man in a dark suit stood there, his face expressionless, his eyes scanning the car with a practiced gaze. "The master is expecting you," he said, his voice low and almost robotic. The Vampire King nodded without a word and gestured for me to follow him. My legs felt heavy as I stepped out of the car and followed him into the mansion. The interior was just as intimidating as the outside. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, and ornate furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. The air was thick with the smell of old books, candle wax, and something else I couldn't place. We walked through a grand hallway, and I couldn't help but notice how the house seemed to hum with life, as though it had a pulse of its own. The Vampire King stopped in front of a large door, glancing at me. "You're going to meet someone who can help you understand what's happening," he said. "But remember, trust no one. Not even the ones who seem like they have your best interest at heart." His warning sent a chill down my spine. Who else was I supposed to trust? He opened the door, and I stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, with a massive fireplace crackling in the corner. Seated in front of the fire was a woman, her long black hair flowing over her shoulders like a dark waterfall. She looked up as we entered, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "Ah, Mia," she said, her voice smooth and calculating. "I've heard so much about you." I froze. "You have?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The woman smiled, a cold, calculating smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The king speaks highly of you. It seems you've already made quite an impression on Lucy." I glanced at the Vampire King, unsure of what to say. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel the tension building in the room. The woman stood up, her gaze never leaving mine. I'm Lady Seraphine, she said. I'm here to ensure that you're prepared for what's to come. You're involved now, Mia, whether you like it or not. The words sent a wave of panic through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She moved closer, her steps silent against the marble floor. You're part of this world now. The world of vampires, bloodlines, and power. And you will be tested. My heart skipped a beat. Tested? I echoed. Yes, she said, her smile growing wider. There are many who would want to use you, Mia. They'll try to manipulate you, to bend you to their will. But you're not just a pawn in this game. You're more important than you realize. I shook my head, trying to make sense of her words. I'm just a waitress, I said, my voice shaky. I don't belong in this world. Ah, but you do, she said softly. You've already proven that by being there for Lucy, by caring when no one else would. That's what makes you valuable. That's what makes you dangerous. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dangerous? I repeated. She nodded. Yes. There are those who will do anything to get to Lucy, to control her power. And they will stop at nothing to use you to get what they want. My stomach churned with fear. What am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lady Seraphine's eyes sparkled with something like amusement. You're going to have to fight, she said simply. For your life. For Lucy's life. For everything. She turned to the vampire king, who had been silent until now. Are you sure you want her to be part of this? She asked, her voice dripping with suspicion. She's not one of us. The vampire king's eyes flickered with something unreadable. She's more than you think, he said, his voice cold. And she'll do whatever it takes to protect Lucy. I didn't know what to say. Everything felt like it was spiraling out of control, but one thing was clear. I was in deeper than I had ever imagined. There was no turning back now. I had to make a choice, and the path ahead was uncertain. But I knew I couldn't back down. Not when Lucy's life was at stake. The tension in the room was thick, the air heavy with unspoken words and secrets. Lady Seraphine's eyes were locked on mine, studying me, sizing me up. I could feel her gaze like a weight pressing down on my chest. Every word she spoke, every movement she made, felt calculated, like she was playing a game I didn't understand. The vampire king stood silently beside her, his face impassive, his presence commanding. I wanted to turn and run, to escape this nightmare, but there was nowhere to go. The moment I stepped into this world, I knew there would be no turning back. You'll have to prove yourself, Lady Seraphine said, her voice smooth like velvet, but there was a coldness to it that sent a chill down my spine. Prove myself, I echoed, my voice shaking slightly. How? She smirked, a cruel, knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. You've already begun the process, whether you like it or not, she said. By being here. By deciding to protect Lucy. I looked at the vampire king, my heart pounding. But I don't understand, I said, my voice rising with frustration. What's so special about her? Why are they after her? And why am I involved in all of this? Lady Seraphine stepped closer, her heels clicking against the marble floor. You're involved because you're the key, she said. You've been chosen, Mia. You've been drawn into this world for a reason. I shook my head, trying to push back the panic that was threatening to take over. I'm just a waitress, I said, almost desperately. I don't belong here. I don't belong with them. It's not about where you belong. The vampire king finally spoke, his voice low, but it carried a weight that made my knees shake. It's about where you're needed. And you're needed here, with Lucy. Protecting her. I swallowed hard. But how am I supposed to protect her? That's the question, isn't it? Lady Seraphine interjected. You don't even know what you're up against. Then tell me. I demanded. Tell me what's going on, what's happening. What do I need to know? She paused, considering me for a moment. You need to understand that Lucy is not just any child, she said. She's the heir to a bloodline that has been hidden for centuries. A bloodline that holds the power to change everything. And there are those who will stop at nothing to control her. To control that power. I felt the blood drain from my face. What kind of power? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The vampire king's gaze shifted to me, his eyes glowing with something dark, something ancient. The power to reshape the world, he said simply. To rule it. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. A child. The heir to a bloodline. The power to rule the world. It all sounded like a bad dream. But the look in their eyes, the intensity of the moment, it was real. I was caught in the middle of something far bigger than I could ever have imagined. But why me? I whispered. Why am I the one who has to protect her? Lady Seraphine gave a small, almost pitying smile. Because, Mia, you're the only one who's ever cared for her, she said. You've already proven that. You've already started protecting her, even before you knew what was happening. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice cracking. You did everything. The Vampire King cut in, his tone sharp, but not unkind. You saw her when no one else did. You gave her comfort when she needed it most. That's more than anyone else has done. I took a shaky breath, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I had never wanted to be involved in any of this. I was just trying to make it through my day, to survive, to get by. But somehow, I had become part of something much larger. So what now? I asked, my voice steadying, though I felt anything but steady inside. What do I do now? The Vampire King's gaze softened, just slightly. Now, you learn, he said. You learn about this world. You learn about the dangers, about the people who want Lucy for themselves. And you train to fight, to protect her. Fight. I repeated. How am I supposed to fight? I'm not like you. I don't have your powers. I'm just a human. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. You have more power than you realize, Mia, he said, his voice low and steady. You have something they don't have, something they'll never understand. You have the ability to care, and that is more powerful than you know. I looked at him, unsure of what to say. His words didn't make sense to me, but I could see the sincerity in his eyes. So what now? I asked again, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on me. We begin, Lady Seraphine said, her voice firm. We begin your training, and we prepare for what's to come. The tension in the room was palpable, but I knew one thing for sure. I had no choice but to follow this path. The path that would lead me deeper into this dark world of vampires, magic, and ancient power. The path that would either lead to Lucy's salvation or to her destruction. The days that followed felt like a blur. The mansion became my world, a strange and dark reality I was forced to accept. My life, once so simple, now seemed like a distant memory, lost to the chaos of the supernatural world I had been thrust into. Training began immediately, though I had no idea what I was supposed to learn. I was human, after all, and in this world of vampires, witches, and ancient magic, what could I possibly offer? But each day, the Vampire King and Lady Seraphine guided me through the motions, pushing me harder than I ever thought possible. The training wasn't physical at first, it was mental, trying to understand the history of vampires, their bloodlines, and the magic that ran through their veins. They spoke of things like ancient pacts, prophecies, and the balance of power, none of which made much sense to me. My mind was overwhelmed, and yet, I couldn't stop. I couldn't back out now. I had made a choice to protect Lucy, and that was all that mattered. Despite the constant questions that filled my head, I had to keep moving forward. One afternoon, after an intense session on ancient vampire rituals, Lady Seraphine led me into a room I had never seen before. It was small, dimly lit, and filled with strange symbols etched into the walls. There was an eerie sense of power in the room, a presence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This is where we will begin your next lesson, Lady Seraphine said, her voice echoing off the stone walls. It's time for you to learn about the magic that binds Lucy's bloodline. You need to understand what you're protecting. I nodded, though my heart was racing. Magic? Bloodlines? I had no idea what she meant, but I couldn't back away now. I followed her into the center of the room, where an ancient book sat on a pedestal. The pages were old and worn, the ink faded but still legible. Lady Seraphine opened it slowly, and as she did, the room seemed to hum with energy. This book contains the secrets of our world, she explained. It holds the knowledge of every vampire bloodline, every pact that has ever been made, and the magic that has kept this world hidden from humans for centuries. She turned a few pages, stopping at one that seemed particularly important. This is the prophecy, she said, the one that tells of the heir who will come to change everything. She pointed to the words on the page, her finger tracing the lines. Lucy is that heir. She carries the power to reshape the world, to either bring balance or destroy everything. I swallowed hard, my mind struggling to process her words. Lucy, she's just a little girl, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She's not a weapon. Lady Seraphine looked at me with a mixture of pity and something darker. You don't understand yet, Mia, she said. But you will. Lucy's power is ancient, and it's something that can't be controlled easily. There are those who want her for their own purposes, to use her power to rule. That's why you're here. To make sure they never get their hands on her. The weight of her words settled over me like a stone. I had always thought of Lucy as just a frightened little girl, lost and scared. But now, I realized, she was something much more. She wasn't just a child in need of protection. She was the key to everything, and I had been chosen to keep her safe. I felt the weight of that responsibility settle on my shoulders, but I didn't have time to think about it. Lady Seraphine continued, her voice steady but urgent. There are forces at work, Mia, forces you can't even imagine. The Vampire King knows this, and so do I. But what you need to understand is that the future is in your hands now. If you fail, everything could be lost. And Lucy could fall into the wrong hands. I nodded slowly, the fear creeping into my chest. But there was something else, something that pushed the fear aside. I had to protect Lucy, no matter the cost. I didn't know how, and I didn't know if I was strong enough, but I couldn't let her down. Lady Seraphine closed the book and turned toward me. The training will get harder from here, she said. But you're ready for it. The power to protect Lucy is within you. You just need to learn how to unlock it. I nodded again, determined to do whatever it took. The world I had entered was terrifying and dangerous, but I couldn't walk away now. Not when Lucy's life, and the fate of everything I knew, was at stake. Lady Seraphine's gaze softened, just slightly. You'll be tested, Mia, and you may not make it out unscathed. But if you're willing to fight, you'll find the strength you need. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the ancient book that held the answers I wasn't sure I was ready to find. I stood there for a long time, staring at the pages, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. I had no idea how I would protect Lucy, or how I would fight the darkness that was coming. But one thing was clear, I couldn't back down now. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was the only one I could take. The days that followed were a whirlwind of lessons, each one more difficult than the last. I had been trained in the basics, everything from ancient vampire history to defensive magic, to the strange, cryptic powers that were said to be hidden deep within me. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to face. The tension between Lady Seraphine and the Vampire King was palpable, but it was clear to me now that it wasn't just about Lucy anymore. It wasn't even just about protecting her. This was about something far greater, something that neither of them had fully explained to me. The more I learned, the more questions I had, and yet, the deeper I was dragged into this world I didn't belong in. It was late one night, after a particularly grueling training session, when everything changed. I was standing in the quiet library of the mansion, going over notes on the vampire bloodlines, when I heard footsteps approaching. At first, I thought it was one of the guards checking in, but when I turned around, it was him, the Vampire King. He stepped into the room, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Mia," he said, his voice low but calm. "We need to talk." His presence in the library sent a strange wave of unease through me. "About what?" I asked, my voice a little more shaky than I intended. "About what's coming," he said, his gaze unwavering. "There's no more time for training. The real threat is here." My heart skipped a beat, and I stood frozen, unable to speak. "You've trained long enough," he continued, his eyes burning with intensity. "Now it's time for you to decide. Will you protect Lucy, even if it means sacrificing everything?" My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. The thought of losing everything, of possibly not being able to protect her, it terrified me. But it wasn't just about me anymore. Lucy was the key to everything, to the future of this world and the dangers that loomed. "I won't let anything happen to her," I said, my voice firm despite the fear that bubbled up inside me. The Vampire King nodded slowly, as if he expected no less. "I believe you," he said, stepping closer. "But you need to understand the consequences of what you're about to face. The ones who are coming for Lucy are powerful. They have magic, knowledge, and weapons that could destroy everything we've worked for." I felt the weight of his words sink in. The air between us seemed to grow heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't understand. What are they? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. They are the Inquisitors, he said, his tone darkening. An ancient order that has hunted supernatural beings for centuries. They're not just interested in Lucy. They want to wipe out the vampire bloodlines, to take control of the magic that runs through our veins. A shiver ran down my spine. The Inquisitors. I had heard whispers about them during my training, but I had no idea they were real. But why Lucy? I asked. What makes her so important? He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for something. She's the last of her kind, he said quietly. Her bloodline is the only one with the power to break the chains that have bound us for centuries. The Inquisitors know this. They've been searching for her for years, waiting for the moment when she would come of age. So, they want to use her, I said, my stomach turning. They want to control her power. Exactly, the Vampire King said, his eyes burning with a fierce determination. And they will stop at nothing to do it. That's why I need you to be ready. I nodded slowly, my heart racing. I had never asked for this, never wanted any of it, but it was clear now. I had a role to play, whether I liked it or not. How do I prepare? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. We fight, he said simply. We take the fight to them before they have a chance to strike. The thought of fighting terrified me. I was just a waitress, a normal person thrown into a world of ancient power and danger. But there was no turning back now. The only choice I had was to stand by Lucy and protect her with everything I had. The Vampire King's gaze softened, just slightly. I know this is a lot to take in, Mia, he said, his voice gentler now. But you're not alone in this. We're in this together. I swallowed hard. Together, I repeated, trying to steady my nerves. What happens next? He looked at me for a long moment before answering. Now we prepare. The Inquisitors won't wait. We can't afford to waste any more time. He turned toward the door, and I followed him, knowing that what lay ahead would be the hardest thing I had ever faced. But I also knew that I couldn't back down. Not when Lucy's life, and the fate of this world, was at stake. The preparations began immediately. Each day blurred into the next, filled with constant training, strategy discussions, and lessons about the world I had been pulled into. The mansion had become my prison and my sanctuary, a place where everything I thought I knew about reality was challenged. But now, I was learning things I never imagined. Dark magic, ancient rituals, and the deadly forces that were closing in on us. The Vampire King, who had once seemed like an unreachable figure, was now guiding me, training me, preparing me for the battle that was to come. Lady Seraphine, though, had a different approach. While she didn't openly show it, I could feel the tension between her and the king. She wasn't entirely convinced I was ready. You're not ready, she had told me the day before, her tone sharp as she adjusted the ancient book in her hands. You're still human. You don't have the power, the instincts, to fight what's coming. Her words stung, but I didn't argue. I couldn't argue. Everything she said made sense. What could I do against creatures centuries old, with powers I couldn't even begin to understand? The training was exhausting, both physically and mentally. The Vampire King had me spar with some of his most trusted guards, each one a skilled fighter, each one faster and stronger than I could ever imagine. Every time I was knocked down, I picked myself back up, determined to prove to them all that I could fight. You're not fighting for yourself, the Vampire King had told me after one particularly brutal sparring match. You're fighting for Lucy. Every time you fall, you get back up for her. That kept me going. Lucy, the reason I was still standing, the reason I was learning how to fight. My nights were spent in the library, poring over ancient texts, learning about the bloodlines, the powers, and the dangers that awaited us. My head spun with everything I had learned, but there was one thing that stuck with me, the prophecy. Lady Seraphine had shown me the part that referred to Lucy, the one that said she would either destroy the world or save it. The weight of that knowledge was a constant pressure on my chest. It was a responsibility I hadn't asked for, but now it was mine. It was my job to protect Lucy, to keep her safe from the Inquisitors, from the forces that wanted to control her. And it terrified me. The days went by quickly, and soon enough, the Vampire King had made it clear that the time for training was almost over. It's time, he said one evening, standing in the dimly lit hallway outside the training room. His voice was calm, but I could hear the edge beneath it. The tension, the urgency. We can't wait any longer. They're coming. I nodded, my stomach turning. Where do we go? I asked. To where Lucy is, he said. We need to take her somewhere safe. The thought of moving her again, of leaving the relative safety of the mansion, filled me with dread. But I knew it was the only option. The Inquisitors were closing in, and if we didn't act now, it might be too late. The Vampire King, Lady Seraphine, and I gathered in the main hall, preparing to leave. The mansion, once my prison, now felt like a lifeline, a place I had come to rely on, but there was no time for hesitation. The outside world was waiting, and with it, the dangers that would test everything I had learned. The door opened, and the cold night air hit me, sharp and biting. I pulled my coat tighter around me, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I didn't know how to fight the Inquisitors, or how to stop them from taking Lucy, but I was ready to do whatever it took. The Vampire King led the way, his cloak billowing behind him, his pace steady and purposeful. Lady Seraphine followed, her eyes scanning the darkened path ahead, as if searching for threats. And I, for the first time, felt a sense of resolve that had been missing since all of this started. I was ready to protect Lucy, no matter what it cost. We moved through the streets, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement. The world felt quieter somehow, as if it was holding its breath. I didn't know what awaited us, but the urgency in the Vampire King's movements told me that we were running out of time. The farther we went, the more I realized just how much was at stake. This wasn't just about Lucy anymore. It was about everything. We reached a small, nondescript building in the middle of the city, and the Vampire King stopped. This is it, he said, his voice low. He turned to me, his eyes burning with intensity. You're ready now. You have to be. My heart pounded in my chest. We were here. The moment of truth had arrived. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. This was it. The fight for Lucy's life, for our survival, had begun. The building was old, its exterior worn by time and the elements. It was hidden in plain sight, tucked between two larger buildings on a quiet street, the kind of place no one would notice unless they were looking for it. The Vampire King stopped in front of the door, his gaze scanning the surroundings with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Lady Seraphine stood beside him, her posture rigid, her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the area, every sense alert. I could feel the tension in the air, thick with anticipation and fear. This is it, the Vampire King said, his voice low and commanding. Stay close, and don't make a sound unless I tell you to. His words sent a rush of adrenaline through my veins. This was the moment we had been preparing for. The fate of Lucy, and perhaps the entire world, rested on what happened next. I nodded silently, stepping closer to them as the door to the building creaked open. The inside was dimly lit, the air musty and thick, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. The wooden floors groaned beneath our feet as we moved deeper into the building. I tried to steady my breath, my pulse quickening with every step. The Vampire King led the way, his movements fluid and silent, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Lady Seraphine followed closely, her gaze constantly shifting, alert to every sound, every movement. I stayed close behind, trying to match their pace, my mind racing with everything I had learned so far. What were we walking into? What were the Inquisitors going to do when they found us? The room we entered was small, but there was a strange, eerie energy in the air. At the far end, a man stood waiting. He was tall, his features sharp and angular, his eyes dark and piercing. His presence was commanding, and I could feel the power radiating off of him. You're late, the man said, his voice cold and smooth, like the edge of a blade. We were waiting for you. The Vampire King didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, sizing up the man in front of him. I wasn't aware you were in a hurry, the Vampire King said, his voice calm, but laced with an underlying threat. The man chuckled softly, a sound that sent a chill through the room. You've been running from us for far too long, he said, his gaze flicking to me for a moment before returning to the Vampire King. But the game is over now. It's time for you to pay the price for your defiance. The tension in the room escalated, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I had no idea who this man was, but it was clear that he wasn't here to negotiate. The Vampire King's gaze never wavered as he stepped forward, his posture relaxed but his aura radiating power. You think you have control over this situation, he said, his voice cold. But you don't, and you won't. Not as long as she's with me. The man's eyes flickered toward me again, and for a moment, I felt like I was being dissected, as if he was trying to figure out my worth in the grand scheme of things. You think she's the key to stopping us, the man said, his voice turning venomous. But she's just a pawn, just like you. And pawns can be sacrificed. His words hung in the air, the threat clear and unmistakable. I felt my heart race, the fear creeping back in. I wasn't a pawn. I wasn't going to let anyone control me or Lucy. The Vampire King stepped closer to the man, his eyes narrowing. If you think for 1 second that I'll let you take her, he said, his voice low and dangerous, then you don't know me at all. The man laughed again, the sound hollow and cruel. You're too late, he said. She's already marked. Before I could react, the man stepped back, and with a flick of his wrist, the room seemed to shift. A faint glow filled the space, and I felt a pull in the air, like something ancient and powerful was awakening. No, I whispered, my heart sinking. Lucy. She's not. The man smiled, his eyes gleaming with malice. She's already claimed, he said softly, almost lovingly. And there's nothing you can do to stop it now. Panic surged through me as I turned toward the Vampire King, my voice shaking. What does he mean? What's happening? The Vampire King's expression was cold, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Anger, fear, and something darker, something ancient. Lucy has been marked, he said, his voice tight. Her bloodline is bound to the Inquisitors. This is the moment they've been waiting for. The moment they claim what's theirs. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned to look at Lucy. She was standing at the back of the room, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. The Inquisitor had marked her. And now, there was no turning back. My pulse raced, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't let Lucy be taken. No, I said, stepping forward, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and resolve. I won't let them have her. Not without a fight. The Vampire King's eyes met mine, his gaze filled with something I hadn't seen before, hope. Then fight, he said simply. And with that, everything changed. The battle for Lucy's life, and for our survival, had begun. The room erupted in chaos as the Inquisitor's words echoed in my mind. Lucy had been marked. I could feel the weight of it, the inevitability that hung in the air. Like a dark cloud, the Vampire King stood still, his eyes narrowed with rage, his muscles coiled like a predator preparing to strike. His hand clenched into a fist, the tension radiating from him palpable. I could hear my heart thudding in my chest, the adrenaline surging through my veins. I couldn't allow this to happen. I wouldn't. We have to fight, I whispered to the Vampire King, my voice shaking but determined. He turned to look at me, his gaze dark and intense. And we will, he said, his voice like ice. But this isn't just any fight. The Inquisitors have more power than we can imagine. I don't care. I shot back, my fear morphing into anger. I won't let them take her. I won't let them win. The Vampire King's expression softened, a flicker of something like respect passing through his eyes. You're braver than I gave you credit for, he said quietly. But this isn't about bravery. This is about survival. And Lucy, he trailed off, glancing over at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and urgency. She's more than just a target now. She's the key to everything, Mia. We have to protect her, or the world as we know it will fall. I turned to Lucy, her small frame shaking in the corner, her wide eyes filled with confusion and fear. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I knew better. This wasn't the time for promises that couldn't be kept. The Inquisitors were closing in, and if we didn't act fast, it would all be over. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We fight, the Vampire King said again, more forcefully this time. And we do it now. He turned toward the Inquisitor, who stood with a smug look on his face, as though he had already won. You don't understand the forces you're dealing with, the Inquisitor said, his voice dripping with arrogance. We've been hunting you for centuries. You've been running, but you can't escape your fate. And yet, here we are, the Vampire King replied, his voice low and menacing. Still standing, still fighting, and still very much alive. Without warning, the Inquisitor raised his hand, a flicker of magic sparking at his fingertips. I could feel the air grow heavy, thick with power. The Vampire King moved first, faster than I could process, his cloak swirling as he lunged toward the Inquisitor, his fist striking with the force of a hurricane. The Inquisitor staggered back, but only for a moment before he raised his hand again, his eyes glowing with dark power. "You think you can defeat me?" the Inquisitor sneered. "You're nothing. I am the reckoning of your kind." The air crackled with energy, the building shaking as if it were about to collapse. I took a step back, fear rising in my chest. This wasn't like anything I had ever imagined. I wasn't a fighter. I wasn't trained for this. But Lucy needed me. The world needed me. And I had no choice but to stand my ground. "Mia now." The Vampire King's voice broke through the chaos. Without thinking, I rushed forward, my instincts taking over. I grabbed a nearby weapon, something ancient, something that had been left behind in the room, and I ran toward the Inquisitor. The moment my hands wrapped around it, the weapon seemed to hum with energy, almost like it recognized me, like it knew I was meant to wield it. I didn't question it. I didn't have time. The Inquisitor's eyes flicked toward me just as I lunged, his expression changing from arrogance to surprise in an instant. The weapon's edge met his side, and he let out a strangled gasp, his hand faltering in the air as the magic flickered and died. The room grew silent. The Inquisitor staggered back, clutching his side, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Impossible," he hissed, his voice filled with venom. "You're just a human." "I'm not just a human," I said, my voice steady now, the fear replaced by something else, something stronger. "I'm the one who will stop you." With a final, powerful move, I swung the weapon again, striking him with all the strength I could muster. He collapsed to the floor, the dark magic fading from his body as he fell. I stood there, panting, my heart racing in my chest, as the Vampire King approached, his expression unreadable. "You did it," he said softly, his voice full of awe and something else. "You saved us." I looked at the Inquisitor's lifeless body, the weight of what I had just done sinking in. I hadn't just fought for survival. I had fought for the future. Lucy's future. The future of everything. "It's not over," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "We still have a long way to go." The Vampire King nodded, his gaze intense. "We do. But this was a victory. A small one, but a victory nonetheless." I turned toward Lucy, who was still standing in the corner, watching us with wide, uncertain eyes. She didn't fully understand what had just happened, but I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of what was coming, the fear of what was yet to be fought. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that this was only the beginning. The silence that followed the Inquisitor's defeat was almost suffocating. The heavy weight of the moment settled around me, pressing in on every side. I stood there, breathing heavily, the ancient weapon still clutched in my hands. The Vampire King was staring at the fallen Inquisitor, his expression unreadable. Lady Seraphine, who had been standing silently by, now stepped forward, her face a mask of concentration. "This victory is temporary," she said, her voice steady. "The Inquisitors will come again, stronger and more determined. This war is far from over." I nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. There was no time for celebration, no time for relief. We had won one battle, but the war was still looming. "We need to move," the Vampire King said, his voice sharp. "We can't stay here. The Inquisitors will have sensed his defeat by now." I felt a pang of guilt. Had I just signed Lucy's fate with my actions? But I couldn't let fear rule me now. I had made a choice. A promise to protect Lucy, to keep her safe. There was no turning back. We moved quickly through the building, the tension still hanging thick in the air. I kept my eyes on Lucy, who was walking beside me, her small form a reminder of everything we were fighting for. Her wide, uncertain eyes flicked between me and the Vampire King, as though she were still processing everything that had happened. "It's going to be okay," I told her softly, even though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "We're going to protect you, no matter what." Her eyes filled with a mix of relief and lingering fear, and she nodded quietly. We reached the exit, where the dark night awaited us. The Vampire King led the way, his steps sure and purposeful. He stopped just outside the building, his eyes scanning the street for any signs of danger. "Get in the car," he commanded, his voice low. Lady Seraphine didn't hesitate, sliding into the back seat of the sleek black car. I followed closely behind, still feeling the weight of the weapon in my hands. Lucy hesitated, her eyes wide with uncertainty, but I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, guiding her inside. The door shut with a soft click, and we were off. The city blurred around us as we sped down the streets, the tension in the air thick with anticipation. I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping into my chest. The Inquisitors weren't far behind. The car turned onto a narrow street, and the Vampire King spoke again, his voice hard and firm. "We're heading to a safe house," he said. "It's an old place, far from here. We'll be safe for now, but we can't stay long. The Inquisitors will know we're on the move soon enough." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. The reality of what was happening was finally hitting me. I wasn't just fighting for Lucy's survival. I was fighting for my own life, for our future, for everything that was at stake. I turned to look at Lucy, who was sitting quietly beside me, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You okay?" I asked gently. She nodded without saying a word, but I could see the fear still in her eyes. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that we'd get through this together, but the words felt hollow. The truth was, I didn't know what was going to happen. We had no guarantee of safety, no promise that we'd be able to stop the Inquisitors, or that we'd even survive the coming battles. But as I looked at Lucy, I knew I had to keep fighting. We all did. The safe house wasn't far, but every minute felt like an eternity. The streets grew quieter as we drove farther from the city, and I couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. For now, we were safe, but I knew it wouldn't last. The Inquisitors would come. They would come for Lucy, for the power she held, and they would stop at nothing to get it. As the car pulled up to the safe house, I took a deep breath. We were far from out of danger, but we had a chance. We had time to regroup, to figure out what our next move would be. The Vampire King's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, and I saw a glimmer of something in his gaze, a mixture of respect and perhaps something deeper. "We'll protect her," he said, his voice low and steady. "No matter what it takes." I nodded, my resolve hardening. Whatever came next, I would fight. I would protect Lucy, and I would protect this world, even if it cost me everything. The fight had only just begun, and we had no idea what awaited us. But for the first time, I felt like I was truly ready to face whatever came our way. I end this thrilling journey through vampire stories. A young woman is thrust into a world she never knew existed. Forced to protect an innocent girl, Mia discovers the true power of her role in the fate of the world. With vampires, ancient bloodlines, and dark forces at play, this tale brings the chilling essence of vampire stories to life. As the Vampire King and his allies guide her, Mia faces the ultimate choice: fight for Lucy's survival or risk everything. The looming threat of the Inquisitors adds layers of suspense, making this story one of the most captivating vampire stories you'll read. Mia's bravery, despite her doubts, shows that even ordinary people can make a difference in the fight against dark forces. As the battle intensifies, the fight for control of Lucy's power becomes more dangerous. With twists, betrayal, and dark magic, this is one of the most unpredictable vampire stories you'll ever encounter. Will Mia succeed in protecting Lucy and stop the forces that threaten them both? Or will they fall victim to the sinister vampire world they've entered? Prepare yourself for a thrilling ride through one of the most intriguing vampire stories where the stakes have never been higher.